The unexpected visitor. The defense drone's high-pitched whine cut through the thin atmosphere of Europa as Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the impossible sight before her research station. A massive, blue-scaled creature with violet-tinged wings stood hunched in the snow, purple blood trailing behind it like breadcrumbs across the endless white landscape. "You're standing on my oxygen recycler, you overgrown lizard," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. The dragon's enormous yellow eyes fixed on her with what seemed like amusement. "Overgrown? I find that rich coming from someone wearing what appears to be a dead mammoth," it sneered, though Sarah could hear pain beneath the sarcasm. "It's synthetic fur, and I didn't spend 6 months' salary on this coat to have it critiqued by an alien who clearly doesn't understand human fashion." Sarah's finger hovered over her drone's controls, red targeting dots dancing across the creature's forehead. "Now state your business or leave my doorstep." The dragon swayed slightly, its massive wings drooping toward the snow. "My ship crashed 20 kilometers south. You're the 13th habitat I've approached. The others either shot at me or pretended not to be home." Sarah's scientific mind immediately caught the discrepancy. Europa Station J11 was supposed to be one of only 5 research outposts on this side of the moon. 13 habitats meant at least 8 unauthorized settlements, something the Interplanetary Alliance would definitely want to know about. "And what makes you think I won't do the same?" she asked, though she was already overriding her drone's targeting system. The creature looked wounded enough. "Because unlike the others, you haven't slammed the door yet. And I need help." The dragon took a labored breath, revealing a deep gash along its side that oozed the same purple fluid. "My name is Kalen, 3rd Navigator of the Stellar Cartography Guild. I believe your term would be, a refugee." "A refugee from what?" "From the same thing you're hiding from," Kalen replied, nodding toward her habitat. "Though I suspect my situation is slightly more urgent." Sarah's hand moved away from the emergency beacon. 3 years ago, she'd fled Earth after discovering her bacterial research had been weaponized. Europa's isolation had been her sanctuary, until now. "How do you know I'm hiding from anything?" "No one voluntarily stations themselves at the farthest outpost on Europa unless they're running from something." Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly of the Titan Biological Research Division. "You resigned rather dramatically after testifying against Alliance military applications of your work." The dragon was right, though Sarah hated to admit it. "You did your homework." "I should also mention that I'm about to lose consciousness," Kalen said, swaying more noticeably. "If you're going to help me, now would be an excellent time." "You expect me to drag a dragon into my habitat? You must weigh at least 2 tons. Considerably less here on Europa," Kalen finished weakly. "And no, I don't expect you to drag me anywhere. I can manage myself if you simply allow me inside. I promise not to die on your floor, that would be terribly inconvenient for both of us." Sarah considered her options. Alliance protocols were clear about unauthorized alien contact, but those same protocols had protected the officials who'd perverted her research. And there was something in the dragon's eyes, intelligence, certainly, but also a profound weariness that resonated with her own. "All right," she sighed, stepping aside. "But I'm setting ground rules. First, explain exactly what you're running from. Second, tell me what medical assistance you need. And third," she pointed at Kalen's snout, "destroy anything in my lab and I'll personally ensure whatever's hunting you finds you gift-wrapped." Kalen's mouth curled in what might have been a smile. "Acceptable terms. And if it helps, I'm herbivorous. Mostly." As the dragon limped toward the airlock, Sarah watched in amazement as its massive form began to shimmer and contract, scales rearranging until the creature was only slightly larger than a horse. "Dimensional compression," Kalen explained, noting her astonishment. "Not extraordinarily painful, but useful in situations like this." The airlock cycled, and Sarah found herself face to face with an alien refugee whose arrival would change everything she thought she knew about Europa, and her place in the galaxy. The living star map. Inside the habitat, Sarah pulled medical supplies from her cabinet while Kalen settled gingerly onto the floor. The dragon's compressed form still filled most of her small living space, but at least she could move around without climbing over wings. "Your turn," Sarah said, approaching with antiseptic and bandages. "What are you running from?" "The simplified version. I'm being hunted by the hegemony for stealing something they desperately want returned." "And the unsimplified version?" Sarah asked, already cleaning the wound on Kalen's side. The purple blood coagulated differently than human blood, but basic wound care seemed universal. "The unsimplified version requires an extensive explanation of galactic politics, the nature of reality, and approximately 19 equations your current mathematics hasn't discovered yet." Kalen extended one wing, revealing intricate patterns that looked like circuitry embedded within the membrane. "But since you've been kind enough to invite me in, I'll try to bridge the knowledge gap." Sarah stared at the wing patterns. They seemed to pulse with their own inner light, shifting and changing even as she watched. "Those aren't decorative, are they? Cartographic engrams. Living star charts that adjust in real time as celestial bodies move. I'm not just called a navigator, it's literally what I am. The Stellar Cartography Guild has been neutral in galactic affairs for millennia. We navigate, we map, we maintain the deep space routes that allow civilization to function. But the hegemony wanted to change that." Kalen hissed as Sarah applied pressure to stop the bleeding. "The hegemony has been expanding, consuming worlds, enslaving species. They developed technology to extract and replicate navigational engrams, to turn our gift into a military asset." Sarah's hands stilled. "Extract them how?" "They captured a guild house on Proxima Centauri B, tortured the navigators there, extracted their engrams." Kalen's voice grew tight with pain and memory. "I was sent to investigate when communication ceased. What I found, they had turned the navigators' bodies into living map rooms. Kept technically alive but mentally destroyed, their wings stretched out as display screens. That's barbaric." "Yes, but not unexpected from the hegemony. What was unexpected was finding that they'd discovered something in the process, a star chart leading to what they call the Genesis point. Which is, according to their scientists, it's the precise location where this universe began, where the fabric of reality is thinnest. They believe they can use it to access parallel dimensions, to expand their empire beyond the confines of this reality." Sarah sat back on her heels, the implications sinking in. "And you have this information?" Kalen's golden eyes fixed on her. "I couldn't let them have that knowledge. So I absorbed the engram during my escape. I became the map they need. And now they won't stop until they've reclaimed it, even if they have to tear apart every habitat on this moon to find me. You've led an alien armada to Europa. Not intentionally, but yes. That's the approximate situation. My ship's destruction would have registered on their scanners. They'll be here within 72 hours. Sarah stood up, pacing the small confines of the habitat. "Wonderful. And here I thought bacterial taxonomy was going to be the highlight of my day." She stopped, turning back to Kalen. "So what's your plan? Heal up and lead them away from here?" "That was the general idea, though my ship is now scattered across Europa's surface, which complicates matters." "Wait." Sarah's mind was racing. "You said there were 12 other habitats you visited before mine. Europa Station J11 is supposed to be the farthest outpost. Alliance records show only 4 other research stations on this hemisphere." Kalen's head tilted slightly. "Your records are incorrect. I detected 27 distinct habitats within a 50-kilometer radius. That's impossible. The Alliance monitors Jupiter's moons closely. Unauthorized habitats would be detected and dismantled. Unless, Kalen suggested, someone within your alliance doesn't want them found." The implication hung heavy in the recycled air. Sarah had fled to Europa believing she'd escaped the corruption of the alliance, but what if she'd unwittingly placed herself at its center? "We need to see these other habitats," she decided abruptly. If there's some kind of secret operation happening on Europa, it might be connected to why the hegemony targeted this system. An interesting theory, Kalen agreed. Though I should point out that in my current condition, I'm not exactly suited for an exploratory mission. Sarah crossed to a locker and punched in a code. Inside was an environment suit and a rover control panel. I have an automated geological survey rover parked outside. It's designed to carry ice core samples, but it could manage your weight if you maintain that compressed form. You're suggesting we investigate potentially hostile settlements while a hegemony battle fleet is en route? I'm suggesting, Sarah replied, stepping into her suit, that I didn't spend 3 years in isolation to have aliens, either your pursuers or whatever's hiding on Europa, ruin my research station. If the hegemony is coming anyway, I'd rather know what we're really dealing with. As she sealed her helmet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet life of exile was about to become something far more dangerous, and far more important, than she'd ever imagined. Hidden secrets beneath the ice. The rover's treads crunched across Europa's frozen surface as Sarah guided it toward the nearest unauthorized habitat. Kalen lay compressed in the cargo bay, his breathing shallow but steady. Through the rover's cameras, Sarah could see their destination, a structure that looked nothing like a standard Alliance research station. That's not a habitat, Sarah muttered into her comm, that's a mining operation. The facility sprawled across a geothermal vent, with industrial extractors drilling deep into Europa's ice crust. Massive storage tanks gleamed under the distant sun, and Sarah could see the telltale signatures of heavy machinery designed for resource extraction, not scientific research. What are they mining? Kalen asked weakly from the cargo bay. Sarah checked her scanners. Water, obviously, but also, something else. I'm reading exotic matter signatures I don't recognize. As they approached, Sarah's blood ran cold. The facility's architecture was wrong, too advanced, too integrated with Europa's natural systems. And the energy readings were off the charts. Kalen, I'm seeing technology here that's decades ahead of current Alliance capabilities. This isn't just an unauthorized mining operation. This is. She paused, trying to process what her instruments were telling her. This is Xenotech. Alien technology. Can you get closer? Kalen's voice was strained. I need to see it. Sarah maneuvered the rover to a ridge overlooking the facility. Through the high-resolution cameras, they could see personnel moving between the structures, but they weren't wearing standard Alliance uniforms. Those suits, Kalen said suddenly. I recognize the design. That's hegemony tech. Sarah's heart stopped. The hegemony is already here. No, those aren't hegemony soldiers. But someone is using their equipment. Sarah, I think your Alliance has been working with them. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. The unauthorized habitats, the advanced technology, the exotic matter extraction, it wasn't unauthorized at all. It was a secret Alliance operation, hidden from their own oversight committees. My God, Sarah whispered. They're not just mining Europa. They're preparing it. This is a staging ground. For what? Before Sarah could answer, her proximity alarm screamed. 3 hover vehicles had launched from the facility and were racing toward their position. We need to go. Now. Sarah threw the rover into reverse, but the pursuit vehicles were faster. Energy weapons lanced past them, superheating the ice around the rover's treads. They're not trying to destroy us, Kalen observed. They want us alive. That's not as comforting as you might think. Sarah swerved around an ice formation, the rover's stabilizers struggling to keep them upright. Hold on. She activated the rover's emergency protocols, designed for escaping dangerous geological conditions. Explosive bolts fired, jettisoning unnecessary equipment to reduce weight. The rover's emergency thrusters kicked in, launching them across a crevasse that their pursuers couldn't follow. But as they landed on the far side, Sarah realized they weren't heading back to her habitat. The rover's navigation system had been compromised. We're being guided somewhere, she said, fighting the controls. They've hacked our systems. The rover carried them deeper into Europa's frozen wasteland, toward a structure that made the mining facility look primitive by comparison. This was the real operation, a massive complex built into a natural ice canyon, almost invisible from above. Sarah, Kalen said, his voice filled with dread. Look at the architecture. That's not human design. The complex was a fusion of human and alien technology, as if two civilizations had collaborated on its construction. And as they were forced into a landing bay, Sarah saw why the hegemony had targeted Europa. The complex wasn't just a staging ground. It was a dimensional research facility. And according to the energy readings now flooding her instruments, they were trying to tear a hole in reality itself. The Genesis point, Kalen whispered. They already found it. They're not just looking for me to complete their star charts. They're using me as bait. As armed figures in hybrid Alliance hegemony gear surrounded their rover, Sarah realized that her exile hadn't been escape at all. She'd been placed exactly where they needed her, close enough to the real operation to serve as the perfect cover story when investigators came looking. The airlock cycled, and Sarah found herself face to face with a figure she recognized from the news feed she tried so hard to avoid. Director Marcus Webb, the Alliance official who'd overseen the weaponization of her research 3 years ago. Dr. Sarah Chen, he said with a cold smile. Welcome to Project Genesis. We've been waiting for you. Behind him, Sarah could see the impossible, a swirling vortex of energy contained within a massive chamber, reality itself being bent and twisted by technology that should not exist. And she realized that the wounded dragon in her rover's cargo bay might be the only thing standing between her universe and complete annihilation. The Genesis Revelation. Director Webb led them through corridors that seemed to bend reality around them. The walls pulsed with alien technology seamlessly integrated with human systems, creating something that belonged to neither species entirely. 3 years, Dr. Chen, Webb said as they walked. 3 years you've been sulking on the frontier while we've been building the future of human civilization. Sarah kept her hand steady as 2 guards flanked her. Behind them, more guards were carefully extracting Kalen from the rover, the dragon's compressed form barely conscious. You mean 3 years you've been collaborating with the same aliens who torture and enslave entire civilizations? The hegemony understands necessity, Webb replied. They offered us technology, resources, and knowledge in exchange for strategic cooperation. A small price for ensuring humanity's survival in a hostile galaxy. They entered a massive chamber dominated by the dimensional vortex Sarah had seen on her scanners. Up close, it was even more terrifying, a swirling maelstrom of energy that made her teeth ache and her vision swim. Around it, human and hegemony technicians worked side by side, monitoring readings that hurt to look at directly. Behold Project Genesis, Webb said proudly. The first stable dimensional gateway ever created. Access to unlimited resources, unlimited worlds, unlimited possibilities. Unlimited destruction, Kalen spoke for the first time since their capture, his voice weak but defiant. You have no idea what you're playing with. A new voice answered, cold, mechanical, definitely not human. We understand perfectly, Navigator. Sarah turned to see a figure that made her blood freeze. Tall, imposing, covered in dark armor that seemed to absorb light itself, with glowing red optics where eyes should be. A hegemony commander. Commander Vex, Webb said with obvious deference. The Navigator is weakened but still functional. And Dr. Chen has the bacterial enhancement knowledge we discussed. Bacterial enhancement? Sarah's mind raced. What does my research have to do with dimensional gateways? Everything, Vex replied in that terrifying mechanical voice. Your extremophile bacteria are the only organic compounds that can survive dimensional transition. They are the key to biological conquest of parallel realities. The horrible truth crashed over Sarah like a wave. They weren't just opening doorways to other dimensions, they were preparing to invade them. And her research, her peaceful bacteria designed for terraforming, would be weaponized to ensure their armies could survive in alien realities. The navigator's star charts will guide us to Genesis points in adjacent dimensions, Webb explained. Your bacteria will allow our forces to establish beachheads in realities where the laws of physics might be completely different. Together, we'll create an interdimensional empire. You're insane, Sarah said. You can't control something like this. One miscalculation and you could unravel our entire universe. Progress requires risks, Vex replied. The navigator will provide the coordinates. You will provide the biological adaptation protocols. Cooperation will be rewarded. Resistance will be painful. Guards forced Sarah toward a workstation while others dragged Kalen toward the dimensional vortex. She could see scanning equipment being prepared. They were going to extract the navigator's engrams by force. Wait! Sarah called out. You don't need to torture him. I'll cooperate if you guarantee his safety. Sarah, no, Kalen gasped. You don't understand. The engram I carry isn't just a map to Genesis points. It's a warning. The original navigators discovered something at the true Genesis point, something that destroyed the civilization that built it. Vex paused. Explain. The species that first mapped dimensional space, they found the source. The point where all realities converge. And they discovered that it's not empty. Something lives there. Something that feeds on dimensional energy. Every time someone opens a gateway, they make it stronger. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the dimensional vortex. Sarah could see doubt flicker across some of the human technicians' faces. The navigators have been protecting the galaxy for millennia, Kalen continued. Not just mapping safe routes, but ensuring no one ever finds the true Genesis point. Because if that thing ever escapes into our reality. Lies, Webb said, but his voice lacked conviction. hfyScience has studied the dimensional matrices. There's no evidence of hostile entities. Because we've kept them from looking in the right places, Kalen replied. But now you're forcing the knowledge out of me. And when you use those coordinates, you won't just be opening a gateway to another dimension. You'll be opening a door for something that has been waiting eons to escape. Commander Vex moved closer to the dimensional vortex, studying its swirling energies. Even if this entity exists, the hegemony has the power to control it. No one has that power, Kalen said. That's why the original civilization destroyed itself rather than let it escape. That's why my people have guarded this secret for so long. Some doors should never be opened. Sarah looked between Webb and Vex, seeing the hunger for power in their eyes overriding any caution. They wouldn't stop. They couldn't stop. The promise of interdimensional conquest was too tempting. But as she watched the dimensional vortex pulse with alien energy, Sarah realized that maybe they didn't need to stop them. Maybe they just needed to ensure that when the door was opened, something else came through first. Something that might be more interested in stopping an interdimensional invasion than enabling one. She began to smile, and for the first time since her capture, Director Webb looked genuinely worried. The Guardian's choice. Sarah's fingers flew across the workstation interface, pretending to input bacterial adaptation protocols while actually accessing the facility's environmental systems. 3 years of isolation had taught her patience, and a lifetime of scientific training had taught her to think several steps ahead. The bacterial matrix is complex, she told Webb, buying time. I need to understand the dimensional energy signatures to ensure compatibility. Behind her, she could hear Kalen being strapped into the extraction device. The dragon caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. He understood what she was planning. Commander Vex, Sarah said suddenly. Your dimensional studies, have you detected any energy fluctuations that seem purposeful? Patterns that suggest intelligence? The hegemony commander's optical sensors focused on her. Explain your query. Dimensional space isn't empty. My bacterial research showed that extremophiles can exist in impossible conditions, evolving consciousness in environments that should preclude life entirely. If there are entities in dimensional space, they might not be hostile. They might simply be protective. Webb frowned. Protective of what? Of the barriers between realities, Sarah replied, her fingers still dancing across the interface. Think about it. If you were a multidimensional being watching various species try to tear holes in the fabric of spacetime, wouldn't you intervene? Theoretical, Vex dismissed. Begin the extraction. As the machine powered up, Sarah triggered her hidden protocol. Throughout the facility, environmental systems began shutting down in sequence, not enough to cause immediate danger, but enough to create chaos. System malfunction, technicians called out as lights flickered and the dimensional vortex fluctuated wildly. It's not a malfunction, Sarah announced, stepping away from her workstation. It's a response. Your dimensional experiments have been noticed. The vortex suddenly expanded, its swirling energies reaching toward the chamber walls. But instead of destruction, something else began to emerge, shapes that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, beautiful and terrifying in their alien geometry. The Guardians, Kalen whispered in recognition. They've come. The entities that emerged from the dimensional tear were unlike anything Sarah had ever imagined. They moved through space like living mathematics, their forms shifting between states of matter and energy. When they spoke, their voices resonated directly in the minds of everyone present. The barriers weaken, they said in unison. The infection spreads. This ends now. Commander Vex raised his weapon, but the energy beam passed harmlessly through the nearest Guardian. Impossible. All matter can be destroyed. We are not matter as you understand it, the Guardians replied. We are the spaces between. The silence between notes. The pause between heartbeats. We maintain the boundaries your species seeks to violate. Webb tried to run, but found himself frozen in place. We can negotiate. The Alliance has resources, technology. You have nothing we require, the Guardians said. But the Navigator and the Healer have shown wisdom. They will be spared. Sarah felt a gentle presence in her mind, ancient and vast beyond comprehension. You understood the danger, Dr. Chen. You chose preservation over exploitation. This choice matters. What about the others? Sarah asked, looking at the terrified technicians and guards. They were following orders. Those who choose domination will face the consequences of their choices. Those who choose differently will be given the opportunity to change. The dimensional vortex began to collapse, its energies drawn back into the space between realities. But as it closed, Sarah saw something that filled her with hope. The facility's stolen alien technology was being integrated with the Guardian's own systems, transformed from weapons of conquest into tools of healing and exploration. The Hegemony Fleet, Kalen said weakly. They'll be here soon. No, the Guardians replied. The infection has been cleansed. The fleet finds only empty space where Europa once was. Sarah's eyes widened. You're moving the entire moon. To a place where it can heal. Where the scars your species has inflicted on reality can be mended. You and the Navigator are welcome to stay and learn, or to carry this knowledge back to those who would use it wisely. Director Webb made one last desperate grab for power, lunging toward a control panel that might restart the dimensional gateway. But as his hand touched the interface, he simply faded. Not destroyed, Sarah realized, but moved elsewhere. Given the chance to make different choices in a different reality. Commander Vex and the Hegemony personnel met the same fate, relocated to dimensions where their drive for conquest would find different outlets, or perhaps, different purposes entirely. The choice is yours, the Guardian said to Sarah. Return to your reality and share what you have learned, or remain here and help us heal the damage that has been done. Sarah looked at Kalen, who was already struggling to sit up, his wounds healing with impossible speed under the Guardian's influence. What happens to the knowledge? The star charts to the Genesis points. The true Genesis point remains sealed, Kalen replied. But the knowledge of why it must remain so, that should be shared. Your people need to understand that some boundaries exist for good reasons. Sarah nodded, making her decision. I'll go back. But not to Europa Station J11. To Earth. To the Alliance Council. They need to know what almost happened here. And they will listen. Sarah smiled grimly. They'll listen to someone who helped prevent an interdimensional invasion. And if they don't, well, I'll find people who will. As the Guardians prepared to return them to normal space, Sarah took one last look at the transformed facility. Where instruments of conquest had once stood, she saw gardens growing in impossible geometries, and laboratories where human and alien technologies worked in harmony rather than domination. Will we see you again? She asked the Guardians. We are always here, they replied. In the spaces between. Watching. Protecting. Hoping that species like yours will choose wisdom over power. The last thing Sarah saw before the dimensional translation was Europa's surface, transformed from a frozen wasteland into something that looked almost like paradise, a place where the barriers between realities were not torn open, but gently maintained. When she and Kalen materialized back in normal space, they found themselves aboard a rescue ship that had been searching for Dr. Sarah Chen for 3 days. She had been reported missing after her habitat suffered what appeared to be a complete system failure. As Sarah began to compose her report for the Alliance Council, she realized that her years of exile were over. But her real work, as a guardian of the boundaries between worlds, was just beginning. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, ancient beings smiled with approval, knowing that humanity had at least 2 advocates who understood that the greatest discoveries were sometimes the ones you chose not to make. The end.